Good morning, everybody. My name is Ashish. I'm the founder of Next Big What and Forward app. And I would like all the panelists to first of all introduce what they're doing, what the company is doing, and then we'll get into the depth of the CAC business. So starting with Vidit.
Hey, hi everyone. So I'm the founder of AirBlack, and we help people launch businesses by teaching them life-changing skills. Currently, India's largest beauty skilling platform. So we help women in 500 plus cities learn skills to launch their home salons or become freelancers or become beauty creators. Very recently launched our boot category where we help people turn into home bakers. These are like 2 month programs. So that's what we are up to.
Hi everyone, I'm Siddharth, a co-founder of Able. So Able is an upskilling platform for young graduates to get their first jobs in non-technical areas like sales, operations, and marketing. You can imagine us as finishing school for all non-tech graduates coming for largely from tier 2, tier 3 colleges, and enrolling our programs, getting important skills to crack their first jobs, second jobs, etc.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Manan. I'm the founder of QMath, which is one of the largest math learning platforms in the world. So essentially what we do is we have a network of 10,000 teachers who run live classes for K to 12 math, kindergarten to grade 12 for kids from across the world. So as of today, more of our revenue comes from outside India. So, through the pandemic, we actually saw a transformation from an India-centric business to a global business. So would love to chat about some of the learnings from that journey today.
Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Vikas Bansal, founder at Kejo.fun. We are a pandemic-born baby, started 18 months back. We're an online platform for live online extracurricular activities for children. The idea is while there is so much STEM in life for all of us, running after IITs and all, but children need to learn the other creative skills which you do via hobby classes in arts, yoga, dance, a bunch of other activities. So kids go to school and then we become the after school for them online where they can learn any kind of activities, and we give them the discipline and confidence to pursue whatever they are passionate about in life. So super excited to be here and kind of discuss with all of you the hot topic of EdTech always.
Yeah, I won't take the VC definition of CAC and LTV. But let's start with Vidit. So why don't you just walk us through the whole journey of basically figuring out the CAC? And so there are different phases of a startup. One is very early stage, when you just hustle through CAC, right? When you figure out, when you go to different forums and start marketing. But how do you productize to a point that you can hand it over to a team, and then they start figuring out the cost of acquisition of customers, and you start putting a number to it.
So I think from a CAC standpoint, if we had to think about it in our business, it is like cost of finding people who want to buy, for instance, a makeup course. And there are two cohorts. One is people who already know that they want to buy makeup course, and second is people who are not aware, but if they find out that they can monetize their makeup skills, they will buy it. In our case, the journey has been first for us, it was just finding out people to come on to places that they're already residing in. So for instance, they were already in Instagram and we brought them to WhatsApp groups. And at that point in time, we really did not care, for that matter, what was the cost of acquiring this customer, because it was very less. And we were trying to fundamentally ask these questions. Number one, what really triggers them to take this decision that they want to pursue makeup professionally? And second, once they have taken this decision, what are the objections because of which they will not purchase? And once those two questions were very clear to us, one is a top of the funnel question and the second is a bottom of the funnel question, we can say that, hey, let's figure out how do we use something like digital marketing to scale it. So once we were very sure about these two questions on WhatsApp groups, through user conversations, through initial sales pitches, that, hey, what gets them started and what gets them to close, we actually started designing ads and started scaling our ads to take it to another level. So I believe that if you have to scale any growth channel, these two questions become very critical to get a strong hold on. Otherwise, at some point in time, your CACs will actually start rising up, and you will not know why. So I think these two things were pretty critical for us before we started productizing it.
Interesting. What about you? Given that your market is outside the Bangalore market, right? So, I mean, what are the channels that you were using, and did you see a very starking difference in different channels in terms of CAC?
Sure. So if you look at the graduate market in India, people coming out of non-technical colleges, non-technical degrees, they have very few options: government exam prep, higher education prep, and you'll be surprised 98% of them come back to the private market right in 0 to 3 years of their graduation, and that's where they're surprised to know that they don't have skills to get their first job. That's where Able comes. So early in the days in 2019, we knew for a fact that YouTube is the only perhaps external social channel which shows immense learning intent, right? People going and searching for topics to learn Lizzie just mentioned like 500 million users for YouTube. You cannot get a better channel than that. So we started investing there. The trick there is to not go after big buzzwords, because there are already influencers and big brands who are capturing these words. So we go and try making content there, you will not rank. So the secret there is to figure out what are micro influencers and nano influencers doing in order to capture niches and audiences that are not able to find answers on YouTube, right? So we started observing these nano influencers and then creating much better content on YouTube. So we currently have a YouTube channel which has a lot of subscribers and happens to be a primary source of acquiring customers for our app. So that has given us a lot. Like for people, SEO works. I think for EdTech, YouTube can work really well. Secondly, we have a free app where the user who is coming in, just imagine that person has gone through school, gone through college, and all the promises have failed, right? They have learned so much only to realize after 1 or 2 years of graduation that they're not good for even a job, right? So building that trust is extremely important, and that's why we have a free app where people can go take courses, learn, and get extremely unique and rare feedback on their skills. That is what we started building, and that's where word of mouth started to kick in. That's where people started to develop trust in us, that this is something that is made for us, right? And so largely these two important things have helped us reduce CAC dramatically. When we launched our paid offerings, because of the existing community that is ever growing because of YouTube, as well as the amazing feedback channels which we have on the app, we were able to bring down the CAC extremely low.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, YouTube and Quora, I think pre-2018 Quora, they have been a very strong acquisition channel for a lot of EdTech companies. So Manan, would love to know, I mean, you guys expanded globally, so what has been the journey?
So I think, Ashish, fundamentally, the quality of any business can be boiled down to CAC and LTV. If you just look at these two numbers at a unit economics level, you can basically talk about how high quality the business is, both from an acquisition and a retention point of view, right? So from that perspective, CAC and LTV have always been one of the top considerations on my mind. Yeah? I was just telling the panel here that I've had nightmares about CAC. There's this dessert called Death by Chocolate, which I really like. And I evolved this phrase internally for my team, Death by CAC. If you don't solve CAC, you will die as a company. Because when a startup runs out of funds, what really happens is they don't have any money left to acquire new customers, right? So we've always obsessed about CAC and LTV. And I think when I think about CAC, it's not just new consumer acquisition. It's also retaining your existing customers, because retaining an existing customer is maybe the probability of doing that is 6 or 7 times higher than acquiring a new customer. So when you look at CAC, you have to look at acquiring both new as well as acquiring your existing customers. And the same goes with, LTV and, with better retention and so on. The ratio can be moved to a level where the business starts becoming very exciting. So for some of our channels, in some geographies, the LTV CAC is as high as 25, 30, which is incredible. For some other geographies and some other channels, India especially, if you look at India EdTech has a CAC problem. And if you look at performance marketing as a channel in India EdTech, what you find is that India is a high CAC, low LTV market. So the LTV to CAC, for many EdTechs is actually less than 1. You'd be surprised to see the numbers. So whenever a new EdTech entrepreneur comes to me and says, what should we do? I always tell them, focus on building your own media, focus on building your own acquisition channels. Don't have this Facebook, Google first acquisition strategy, because ultimately you will hit a ceiling. Ultimately, those channels are designed to give you an initial scale, but beyond that, there's no way that's going to scale. You will suffer death by CAC if you're only relying on performance marketing. So if I were to start QMath again today, I would actually first build a massive YouTube channel with tens of thousands of videos and so on. Something like what this interesting startup called PhysicsWall has done. Very very interesting play. Because once you've solved your acquisition problem, then it's possible to build an exciting business. The other thing is, if you have not solved for the core consumer experience, whatever that unit transaction is, there's no point stepping on the acquisition pedal, because ultimately all that money will be wasted. And I mean, we have been guilty of it in the past, and I see so many companies, so many startups doing it all the time. I've now started thinking of your acquisition funnel also as a product that you put out there, and if that product is not optimized, because the consumer has multiple touch points with the brand through that acquisition funnel. So if that acquisition funnel as a product is not optimized, if it's not automated, if all the right journeys are not built in and so on, if you're not able to establish trust with the consumer and so on, ultimately you will see huge churn through that acquisition funnel. And not only is it increasing your CAC, but you're also actually disappointing a lot of potential customers who will not come back to you again. So I think for some reason, maybe because a lot of capital has flowed into the ecosystem and so on, I think we kind of evolved these bad habits of quickly turning on marketing dollars but not optimizing the funnel completely. So I keep telling my team that Facebook, Google, performance marketing channels like these, they are like a drug. Once you turn them on, it's very very hard to turn them back off. So first solve your acquisition funnel, first solve your consumer touch point, consumer life cycle, all of that stuff, and then you step on the pedal. So yeah, that's how I generally think about this stuff.
Very interesting. Yeah, Vikas.
Yeah, I think Manan touched upon it very nicely, right? The main thing is LTV to CAC ratio. And in EdTech, for us, the main LTV will kind of come from retention. For a business like us, like we're not like in a test prep, people kind of come and kind of give us like 1 or 2 lakhs upfront. We have to kind of keep on renewing the customer back and back again and again for different activities, for different levels around that, right? So we spent the first 1 year of our existence building a solid product and making sure the customers who are kind of coming to us are kind of renewing with us, retaining, and kind of doing multiple courses with us. So that was the main metric that we kind of obsessed with. So before we kind of go and figure out a go-to market fit for CAC and acquisition, we wanted to kind of get some sort of product market fit, and which is kind of answered more by how many customers are kind of coming and retaining with us and kind of doing more multiple activities with us. So we spent a lot of time on that. So that is what the productization was about, that the experience should be wow for them, right? Once you're going to figure out, yes, this product works, and then you also need to kind of figure out the right market, right? And we are still figuring it out, I would say, right? Like what I was saying, like India versus international, and even international, like the different markets, and within India also, it's like a market of multiple markets. Which market work for you? You have to kind of figure it out over time. There's no point of optimizing for a CAC in a market which is not even your market, right? You might be optimizing CAC for India market, but you kind of figure out later that your market is a better product market fit in international market, and within India, you're optimizing for tier 2, but the market is in tier 1. It's just a waste of time, energy, and resources, especially in the very young startup around that, right? So we wanted to make sure that we first kind of figure out the right customer cohort for us, the right market, and then we go about optimizing for the CAC, right? And to be honest, we are still figuring out that journey over there of how we kind of do it, but maybe over time we kind of would love to share more of what didn't work for us. We also tried multiple things, like something like YouTube unfortunately didn't work for us. We tried for some time, maybe we tried it in the wrong way, but it's also not like something which works for somebody else will kind of work for you. So it's also very important that you figure out a way of kind of doing quick experiments, figure out whether is that even the right channel for you or not. Once the channel is kind of working out, then kind of double down on that, rather than just kind of doing it because it's kind of working for somebody else.
Yes, I think there are a lot of channels which work under certain context, and some of them just don't work. So one of the channels, I mean, I have run a bootstrap business for more than 10 plus years. It's still going strong. One of the things that has always worked for us has been the community angle to it, but it requires a lot of investment. I think EdTech has done some great stuff with community. So would love to know what you guys have done, and how have you productized, or even looking at productizing the community base?
So I think, firstly, like a short brief on our community. Most of our community resides on Instagram and WhatsApp, and that's also true in real life. Like these are women in the age group of 18 to 35, residing in tier 1, tier 2 cities, very ambitious, and they are skilled in one thing and they want to think about how they can monetize it. So our current Instagram is close to 200,000 followers, and we have spent less than ₹1 lakh in gaining followers. And our WhatsApp community, in fact, is close to 500,000 people. We are probably one of India's largest WhatsApp communities. So how we eventually figured it out was that we have some guidelines that we made even before we started anything. Community is actually very similar to writing a high quality article. Like, first question you answer is that who's going to be your audience, and it has to be very specific, right? And even more important than that has been who's not our audience. So for instance, we said that our audience is this age group, women in tier 1, tier 2 cities. And who's not our audience? People are looking for casual makeup content. So we really knew that what kind of content to create for what audience and what kind of content not to create. And the trick was that, hey, if we create the right kind of content, people will just come. The second thing that we said at the start of building this community was that content can't be 20% better than existing content. It has to be 5 to 10 times better. So I think as long as we have held true to these two principles, like creating something specific for an audience and realizing what not to create, and second, creating 10 times or 5 times better content for our audience, people have just come by. I'll also make it more specific by giving an example. So for instance, we do, like if you go to Air Black's Instagram page, it is almost impossible that you'll find us marketing our classes. Although we do like 50 million brand impressions a month, 85% of them are organic. But you'll barely find us talking about, hey, come buy a paid course from us. It's mostly always about giving. Like we create knowledge content. You'll not find memes, for example. Although, I mean, when you start off and you say, what's the success metric for us on Instagram, it's engagement. What gets more engagement? Memes get very high engagement. But we have restrained away from that because if we do memes, then we'll probably attract the wrong kind of makeup enthusiasts and not the people who are seeking knowledge, right? So I think staying true to that has been very helpful in creating these media properties at scale that attract the right kind of audience. As we have scaled, the success metrics for us have also evolved. Once we have this community on the platform, of course, the second business question to ask is, okay, how do you monetize it, right? So again, we go back to saying that we'll monetize it by giving more. So a lot of our free workshops and free classes today, they happen because we announce them on our Instagram channels or our Instagram network of influencers. And these people come at like almost 1/5 of cost per leads compared to performance marketing. There now the success metric that you've defined is that if we do a class, then it has to have a very high turnout. that means that we can't do random classes. So I'm happy doing one class which has 5,000 registrations and 4,000 people turning up versus 5,000 registrations and 1,000 turning up. So that allows us to do lesser number of high quality classes and in turn make a brand that if Airblack is doing a workshop, it is going to be very high quality. And that has given us dividends over a period of time. Like even today, for both our paid and free classes, the turnouts average close to 75 to 80%. And in the last 6 months, we've scaled from close to 10 workshops a month to now almost 800 workshops a month. And we've actually seen the value of that by, our CACs have come down by 67% in the same period. So keeping these two principles in mind, which is like the principle of giving and identifying the right audience, and second, turnout percentages at scale, has allowed us to do justice to our consumers by giving them high quality content. And that's it, that's really it. This is one channel we see working out right now, but then maybe people ahead in the journey might be able to share what really breaks. But in the last 6 months, this is one thing that has given us dividends.
Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, the whole community piece is difficult to crack and retain. So, are these educational content on your Instagram and all? So, do you have, how do you kind of plan it out in a way that you know that this is going to, going with the taste of the audience, and at the same time, it's not too repetitive, because from what I've generally seen, most of the companies, they end up repurposing the same content again and again on different channels. And the teams become lazy after a certain fundraising round. So
I think there were two phases for us. There was phase number one when we were a small community. At that point in time, I remember for the first 5,000 followers, we kept our page private. And we used to acquire the first, what we call as seeders. First 5,000 people we actually acquired through performance marketing, but running very targeted performance marketing ads to get in people who want to buy makeup to upskill themselves. And we use these 5,000 people as a playbook to sort of experiment a lot of properties with. So it used to be a private page. We would do a property, for instance, we'll start with doing content for professional skincare, and we'll measure engagement percentage. And it used to work like product, right? We'll launch 5 ideas, 2 of them will work, 3 of them we'll not create more content on. That initial experimentation allowed us to scale this to close to 80,000-90,000 followers at almost 6-8% engagement rates, which was very good. Now it's different because we have a community that's seeking. So we have 2 phases of experiments going on, 2 phases of content creation going on. One phase of content creation is at scale, which is what we know works. And there we have planned our calendars for almost 2 months, right? We know what is the feed going to look like. Now we also do the same on YouTube, so we know what's the content going to look like. We work a lot on making sure it goes through the right design reviews, right editorial reviews. And the second part of the problem is experimentation, for which there's a different team. Now their job is to ensure they launch 5 ideas every week, and they measure which one's working and which one's not working. So I think at scale, these 2 things now help us launch newer properties as well as scale existing properties. I think very similar to what you would do if you were creating a product, and that's been working well for us.
Cool. So would love to know, you talked about micro-influencers, right? So how do you go about figuring out these keywords? Because sometimes these keywords are too small, right? To justify a team's effort, right? It might be a good individual YouTuber's interest, but not as a company, right? So how do you go about ensuring that, these are great keywords, these are the micro-influencers, and, we target them?
Sure. So when you go out and look for these keywords, there's not just one thing that you're looking for, right? So you're looking for, are there multiple micro-influencers or nano-influencers who are creating content on the same topic? What it means is essentially this topic is going to, pick up. So I'll give you a very specific example. Back in 2019, Byju's was hiring for BDs in large numbers, right? And no influencer, no article was actually, sort of covering that. But there were, this whole group, bunch of nano influencers who were recording their interview experiences, saying that this is an amazing opportunity, you guys should try, this is how you should crack interview, this is how you should learn. And that is where we understood, okay, this is something that nobody is looking at, and we can start creating content and bring people to learn sales on our app. So I think in order to understand essentially what you're looking for is a topic or a problem in a learner's mind which is not solved yet. And the nano influencers are really good at identifying that, because they don't want to fight the big influencers, right? So they want to create their own niche. So you have to see whether there are multiple nano influencers who are creating on the same topic. Second, do you see other signals which show that this topic is actually growing, right? The macroeconomics of it should also support, right? So for in our case, whenever there's a huge drive happening in, let's say, Infosys or in big companies, this starts to happen, right? So you get these macro data points. Okay, this topic is going to blow. This is the small, and nano influencers creating topic is the first step, perhaps, on YouTube, where you can start creating content, and you can do a better job because you have all the expertise, so you can create and then rank on that. So I think two things: one, are there more nano influencers who are interested in it? Two, are the macroeconomics working for this? And third, obviously, it should align with what your core product and core value proposition is. If it is adjacent, then it can be actually dangerous for you, right? For example, if I go for able jobs, if it starts going for tech jobs, that will be disastrous for us, because the kind of audience that will start attracting to us is not interested in non-technical courses and those jobs. So these are the few things that one needs to really take care of while implementing the strategy.
Cool. And how do you measure the success of such campaigns, especially at scale?
Right. So what we have seen is, this might be surprising for a lot of folks. YouTube actually works well, not only for brand building and your communities outside, which happens to be in most companies, one more activity that you should do in order to grow. It actually is a very good transaction channel. Our download to view ratio was as high as 10%, 20% at times. Like 100 people viewing, 20 people downloading your app. So actually, and that's just one asset you have created. You are not paying it on every download, right? You have created one asset, and that is paying you again and again the dividends, right? So it happens to be a wonderful channel for EdTech. If your customers and learners are going to YouTube to learn, if you are able to crack that categories of keywords, you can actually turn it into a very very fundamentally strong acquisition channel that can pay you dividends long after you have actually created those content. So it actually works well. The basic thing is you would essentially integrate your brand in the video, right? You're going to give them anything with respect to information about job, information about the course, about how top burning questions in their heads, and then that's where you would integrate and say, hey, why don't you download this app and learn more about it? And essentially you would see that your ratio is high eventually after certain experimentations, and then that's where it will all start justifying. The most interesting thing is that you have to pay just once to create this asset. After that, you move on, and that asset keeps working.
Very interesting. So Manan, would love to know, I mean, you have played with multiple growth channels, traction channels. Since QMath has gone global and you are seeing traction from different countries, what are the channels that has worked in some countries, which has been like a big flop in another country, and in general from a CAC point of view?
I think community has been a huge channel with its Siddharth's point. We are a two-sided platform. We have teachers on one side, we have students on the other, and on both sides of the platform, we have seen massive new acquisition happening via referrals. Teachers referring new teachers and students referring other students. In fact, most of our, or a majority of our US growth, which is one of our biggest countries by revenue today, a majority of growth in the US has happened via referrals. And while these two have covered or touched upon some of the tactical stuff related to community building, so let me just talk a little bit about the more deeper, fundamental principles around how I think a community should be built, because it's not obvious, it's non-trivial to create a community that loves you, that refers other people to you and so on, right? So I think at its heart, a community is about some kind of meaning, purpose, some strong point of view. At the extreme end of the spectrum, the strongest communities are cults or religions. If you look at the LTV CAC of a religion, the LTV is infinite and the CAC is 0, right? So what can we learn from that? How can we bring in some elements of a religion or a cult into our own community building efforts? One thing that's helped us from a QMath perspective is this razor sharp focus on math. So we've always maintained from day one and even today that we stand for math excellence and we will never do anything else. So our mission on day one and today is exactly the same. This has allowed us to build a very deep product experience when it comes to math. We have a very sharp point of view on how math learning should be done and so on. And we constantly talk about it with our teachers, with our parents and so on. So for example, with our teachers, we talk more about learning outcomes, about math excellence than we talk about, monetary outcomes and so on. Although that is important, but what gives teachers more meaning or more purpose is the fact that they are, creating this impact with their students on a day-to-day basis. It's very powerful. And that's why teachers love their jobs on the platform. And that's why, they refer more teachers. And the same thing happens on the student side. I think if brands, platforms, startups can figure out the community angle, if they can build a loyal, following of consumers who then go on to refer more consumers and so on, I think that's the holy grail. And for us, that's worked out really well, but it's not easy. It's very hard.
So I think I'll go back to a very basic definition, and I've often seen investors and several other entities talking about community, but there's a big difference between community and audience, right? So how do you define the community? For example, just because somebody has a reach, that's just audience reach. It's not community. Community is often a P2P interaction, right?
Yeah.
So
I think a community is far more powerful than an audience. An audience is passive. An audience is a recipient of what you have to say. They may not find it, they may find it good, they may not find it good. But they listen to you, they follow you maybe on Twitter or LinkedIn and so on. But a community is people who stand with you, who share in your meaning and your purpose. And hence building a community by definition is far harder than building an audience, right? So a lot of people these days talk about building a personal brand, for yourself. So when you're building a personal brand, essentially you're building not a community, but an audience. You're building followers, you're getting people to listen to what you have to say, but they may not necessarily share that sense of meaning, or they may not agree with your point of view. And I think building an audience from that perspective is relatively easy. You need to, I'm not saying it's straightforward, but it's relatively easy. But building a community is an order of magnitude or 2 orders of magnitude harder, because you have to get other people to see what you are seeing. And that's really hard, I think from day one, a new startup or, early stage startup should think about how they can bring in those elements of community building into every workflow that exists in the company, whether it's with employees, whether it's with, consumers, vendors and so on, right? So something as simple as how you greet a new consumer on a first consumer call, it matters because it defines how the consumer is perceiving a brand. So is it taking you closer to that feeling of, creating a cult, or is it taking you away from that? So I think people should be very thoughtful about this. Folks who are building companies should be very thoughtful about how to get those elements of community building, cult building into their daily workflows. And I think community is, a weak word. I think if you really have to hit a high bar in your own thinking, you should think about how you build a cult around what you're doing. So yeah.
Yep. Because would love to know your perspective.
Yeah. So in our case, there are 2 set of users, right? One is parents who are kind of actually paying, but then there are children who are actually kind of using the product and kind of giving us time, right? And nowadays I also have an 8-year-old daughter, and I feel like her schedule is more busier than mine. and that's true for many more children, right? So it's very tough to kind of get their attention, and they're so busy with their schools and after school and so many activities, playtime, so many things kind of going on, right? So it's very important that whatever they're doing, they're kind of enjoying that, having fun. That's when they kind of come back to you, right? So I like what Manan was saying just in the end, right? Anything and everything that you do should be having an element of community in that, right? That's so like in our case, we being a platform where you're kind of not learning, like let's say a math, where it is still easy to say, like if you do math, if you do 2 + 2 = 4, yes, you know math or not, right? And so many other examples around that, right? In our case, it's a very open field. Like in a art, you don't know whether you're doing art, and there's no right or wrong in that. It's all creative, right? It's all inspiration from each other, right? And for us, it's always like how we can be more of a maybe a product driven community also around that, right? So for us, what we built was like a product called Canvas, in which when the child is learning something, they're able to showcase their outcomes and kind of share with each other and get inspiration from each other, inspire each other around that, right? While it is the same artwork being taught, different children are kind of applying the same concept in a different way. Then they kind of learn much more from each other, kind of get inspired around the same. All right. So those are the kind of elements that we kind of keep on building, right? When we started, we had even one-on-one classes and the group classes, but over time we realized that they're having more fun in a group classes. So we kind of got away from one-on-one classes. We don't even kind of put it on the website and do it like really like if somebody really needs it for special needs, right? So in a class itself, how they have that kind of a feeling of like, yes, they're kind of working in a cohort, working with each other, and then kind of going back, uploading their work, and kind of then getting inspiration from each other in the community is how we kind of make sure in the entire journey, when the learning is kind of happening, they're kind of doing it together. And we have seen even a simple example like when you do a free trial class in which one child comes has a lower conversion rate compared to a class in which we get multiple children, right? So that itself shows like we being social, we just want to interact more with each other. We want to kind of share with each other more around that, right? So for us, it has been more around not a community is not in fact a acquisition channel, but more of an engagement and a retention channel for us, right? Because more you're kind of doing activities with us, engaging more, sharing more, then you're kind of doing more and more activities with us. So it's more of a retention channel rather than acquisition channel for us.
Yeah, that's a great point, that community as the retention channel than acquisition channel. I mean, who should be running communities? Is it the marketing team, or is it the product team, or is it somebody else, right? I think that's a fundamental question. So what is your take?
I think you can't outsource community building to one team. It has to start from the founder. It has to start from the top. Every person from the top down needs to be committed to this effort. That's the only way to build it, right? I think there's this often quoted example of Apple Genius bars, where if you walk into one of the Apple Genius bars, the person there will speak to you in a way that will give you this conviction that that person knows what they're talking about. They are deep into it. They love the technology. They love the Apple devices and so on, right? Apple has in some way engineered that feeling in every retail store. That can't happen just with the marketing team owning that mandate. Same goes for Starbucks, for example. It has to come down from the top. And as I think it's not one of those checklist things, that okay, this quarter I'll focus on community building. It doesn't. It'll never work that way. You have to ingrain community building, cult building into your DNA from day one of starting a new company. And if you've not done so, start it right away. But it has to be a permanent, ongoing kind of effort. Yeah.
Yep, totally agree. I mean, any one of you who wants to add to that?
I think this is one challenge that we struggled through a lot when the initial community got transferred from me and 1 or 2 people handling it to more people handling it. And I think 3-4 months back, we decided to do something interesting. We made this one big onboarding session with 2 to 3 weeks of shadowing for every leader and every person in the company, which we called as member culture. So we call our users members. And we realized that how you have a culture session for the company, it is very critical that every person who's involved in key decision making, and that's actually all people in the team right now because it's a 40-50 member team, they should know what our member culture is. And that's true for our instructors. And I won't say it's still working because we still keep on getting a lot of angst sometimes of things that are unacceptable to us, but people are happy. Like they'll still rate your class 5, but we know that we didn't do this right. But I think the step, check. The point around it starts top down, and it is a continuous spectrum. What in time initiative is absolutely right. Maybe we solve it through this, or maybe there are more ways. But this is one challenge that we're going through right now. That how do you actually ensure that the entire org embraces it? Versus few people in the team.
Right. So, as Manan rightly said, right, there's difference between audience and community. For us, YouTube largely happens to be an audience play, right? But communities exist inside the app when somebody's taken a decision. So communities only exist when there is a purpose. The problem with the Indian job market is that a young graduate is outside, does not have a very clear purpose in his head, right? You can go on Facebook and see, I think millions of job groups and no meaningful engagement happening there, right? We have all been there. So for us, we learned this hard way. Communities really work well when the learners have decided what they want to stand for, what they want to get in their lives. And that's where we see the magic starts to happen. People start supporting each other, people give feedback to each other, exercises, and this transforms into something even more wonderful once they've graduated from our programs. These placement groups now have a purpose. I want to get a job as an operational analyst. And they are helping each other, finding jobs, giving feedback to each other's interview, asking and help, seeking help in terms of how to prepare better. So I think for us, like Crejo, I think community is a retention channel. It's more about helping each other go towards a common cause, common mission. Beyond the funnel where people are distracted, I think we have taken a step back that we are not going to create like communities because people are very, very distracted, and there's all sorts of non-meaningful conversations going on there.
Cool. I think let's move on to the. So I think we have a few minutes left, so we'll probably wrap up with 2 questions or so.
Maybe just a quick point to what Siddharth said. So I think he's spot on in saying that there are a few models or a few platforms or a few spaces where prima facie community building might seem hard, but when I think of community, I think of what conversation 2 people in their drawing room are having about your brand. That's also an aspect of how people feel about the platform and so on, right? So I mean, maybe 3 or 4 years back, I was using both Amazon and Flipkart, and now I use only one of them. And that might be true for a lot of people here. But why is that? I mean, it's the most mundane possible platform, which is, e-commerce. So you might think that, okay, community building around an e-commerce platform is hard. But just by sheer excellence in consumer service or consumer obsession, people talk about that platform, and people stick with it. So that could also be interpreted or seen as community building of some kind, not in the sense that's typically understood, but in a wider sense of people talking about your brand in a positive way, people telling other people, their friends, their relatives, that if you want to do this, you go here and do this.
Yeah, I mean, also the bigger element of community is that they're also passionate about the main brand or the purpose. So I remember, once, when we were plugged out in, Nextpivot was plugged in, we had a very active forum, and people would share a lot of things about their startups in the forum. And we once changed the logo, and instantly people started, cribbing about it, right? So there was an opinion that, you cannot change it without our approval, right? So I think that is when the real passion around the brand comes in, and they're not audience, you're not paying them, but they just believe in you. And the moment you move here and there, they will kill you. It also has a negative effect. Flipkart was largely a books company in the first 2 years, right? The moment they moved out of books, the book lover community just went against them. I remember talking to Sachin around that time, and he was like, yeah, we have to move out of books, but if you see phones, right? So So how do you kind of keep the community part together is obviously a very tricky piece. And I'm sure that as each one of us go along and scale, we'll see more challenges and more fun. Coming to probably the most important part of CAC is retention, LTV. So what have you guys seen? What are you, how are you figuring it out? I mean, you have lesser CAC, but what does it mean from LTV point of view?
Check. I'll just repeat this. So you asked that how does it impact our LTV? Is that it? So I'll be hypothesizing versus I'll be sharing something which is data driven. We have some early signs where, so what we do is like we measure ratings live for our classes, which is a real-time indicator of how we are serving our existing customers, members. And at the end of the course, we share like a very detailed NPS survey. And that is where we get to know how we did overall. Now, those NPS surveys show that, hey, our NPS hovers between 65 to 75. That's awesome, but what does it mean for revenue? So we have only two things you can do today after you've completed your course. One is you can buy a yearly revision package. And second is that you can buy another course. We don't have a renewals team today. So we see that close to 20% of the people, they just reach out on our customer support channel and they say, hey, we want to do more. Now that is a leading indicator for us to say that we are generating delight in the community. And the big reasons that they want to do it is because more than our compulsory batch classes, our optional practice classes get 80% turnout. So that is the biggest reason why people come to and say, hey, we love doing this. It gives us mental peace. It feels that we are revising. It is therapeutic because it's makeup and art, right? And we want to continue doing this. So that's the leading indicator that, hey, we are doing something good in the community that will impact our LTV moving forward. But for LTV to move more than the community, you need to have renewal products. So as a company, we are probably too young to have many renewal products today where they can actually pay us and we can say that this is working, but it's just leading indicator and what we say is vibe and gut. So that is my answer to this.
So
Sure.
would love to know from a retention point of view, what are some of the stuff that you guys have been up to, and keeping that, I mean, the CAC keeps going up, right? So no matter how many content that we create or influence that we partner with, the CAC will keep going up and will keep changing, depending on the seasonality as well, right? So how are you looking at retention and LTV?
Sure. That's an absolutely valid point. Essentially, acquisition is just one part of the play, right? Once you get the user, once you get the learner, what you're going to do with them. For us, graduation rate or course completion rates happens to be very important because that's where the entire journey of skilling happens and you are enabled to get a job. So I'll share a couple of stories that are very interesting and close to my heart. So when we started off, we used to grapple with graduation rates. Earlier on, we used to think it's a very skill-based course, hard to complete, fast track. We're trying to create a medicine for this problem of unemployment. So, दवाई तो कड़वी लगती है लोगों को. But we started figuring out some pattern. Whenever we go on calls with these students, or to basically understand why they are not doing classes or why have they missed a certain session, they would always ask few questions. Sir, interview कब है? When's the interview? Or, okay, sir, that's great, but what are the companies that I'm going to interview for? And that used to trigger us that, okay, we have partnered with companies, you focus on skilling, right? Why are you so worried? And that's where we realized something, that they care more about outcomes. That is what propels them to take that hard journey of skilling themselves, practicing with us and actually improving themselves. So we did a very small thing. We gave them an option to choose their own interview date and choose the brands that they aspire to interview with even before they start the course. And our graduation rates went through the roof. The reason was very simple, apparently, that they really care about the outcome. So you have to speak in their language, right? And it's just a feature, but how it transformed the overall company was now it affects how our sales pitches are. Now it affects how our positioning is. Now it affects how our UX writing happens on the app. All sorts of things, right? Because we know what the learner cares about. Second interesting thing that happened was we used to see a significant drop-off in the first module of the course. And that was significant as compared to the other parts of the course. So what we started doing was some cohort analysis and see what are the trends, why is this happening. Apparently, it figured out that from the surveys and from the user research that the first people who were dropping off in the first unit had a very exploration kind of mindset, right? So they were looking out for different jobs. They were testing waters. They were figuring out whether this is right or wrong, right? And on the other end, people who dropped off in the later stages of the course, they were, more concerned about, sir, ye wala question mere se nahi ho raha tha. Sir, I was not able to crack this problem, and thereby I thought maybe I'll come later, right? So we realized that there is an aha moment in a learner's journey. We all have been through classrooms, and it's evident that after a point, if you are not getting the concept, after a point, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to stick to your class, even though you're physically present there, but you're off, right? Similarly, in online learning journeys as well, there is an aha moment. Once the person has bought that purpose and your learning methodology, essentially they will work hard with you to improve themselves, to go, travel miles with you. So we decided that our P1 rate, which is the first module rate, completion rate, will be sort of the aha moment, and then we started focusing our product interventions and marketing efforts to make sure that people are completing this. Because if they've done that, they have bought the concept, they have bought the job, they have bought the idea of, okay, this is a hard journey that I want to move forward with, and I'll do this. So these are a couple of things. One interesting and very counterintuitive thing that happened was that we came from Udacity background, by the way. And Udacity is a very media-focused company, very focused on high-quality media that needs to be created in terms of videos and flashy animations. So we were, naturally very biased while creating instructions for our courses. Apparently, it worked. It did not work at all with us. We used to see poor graduation rates, and even worse, people were not getting skilled at all. The reason we figured out we were extremely, stumped, that this audience is actually learning first time in their lives online. They haven't taken an online course ever before. And how do you sort of engage such an audience with all these videos? They say it becomes really hard to go back to the video in order to revise if I've done something wrong in the exercise. To go back and learn all of this. And it becomes hard to take notes while you're speaking something, so I have to go back, move forward. And that's where the hybrid content came into the picture, where we used video as a reinforcement mechanism, while you had flashcards, memory cards, very book-like fashion, which they are really familiar with. And that really ended up helping us, retain folks and help them feel more confident.
Yeah, on Forward App, that's one of our core thesis, that flashcards actually have the highest memory retention, from a learning point of view. So yeah, that's very interesting. So Manan, would love to know, again, since yours is a very global business,
yeah,
retention across geographies, across different cohorts, how do you manage that?
I think one mistake that a lot of people make, and I've been personally guilty of, is to assume that CAC and LTV are uncorrelated, but actually they're not. If you don't focus on retention, your CAC will also go up, because ultimately the consumer network that you're trying to tap into is a finite network, right? And there are some nodes in the network that are green on you, who like you, and there are some nodes who are gray that you've still not acquired. But then there are other nodes who have become red, who hate you, right? And for some reason, we tend to focus on the gray nodes. How do we convert these into greens? But we tend to ignore the red nodes. But the red nodes, in my experience, are far more powerful than the greens. Right? It's the classic NPS thing: promoters versus detractors. Detractors are far more powerful than promoters in how they communicate about your brand. I remember a few years back, in one certain region, we were seeing a lot of non-conversions. And we actually saw when we actually ran that data, we saw 74 non-conversions attributed to just one unhappy consumer. 74. That one single consumer had made it his life mission to go around in his city, in his region, and convince everyone not to join us. So that's obviously an extreme case, but red nodes do impact you in a very negative way, right? So focus on retention actually should be far higher than focus on new acquisition. I think that's the first principle that I would kind of talk about. I think the other thing I've seen is that if your initial onboarding is very strong, that gives you a massive retention lift. Because when you onboard a consumer properly, when you talk to them about the service properly, when you get them to experience the first aha moment of your service quickly and so on, that consumer will tend to have a far better retention curve on your platform versus someone who's not been onboarded properly. I think onboarding is one of the most ignored areas of a consumer life cycle, and if you solve that correctly, if you kind of convey this idea to the new consumer that you're joining a tribe, you're joining a community and so on, and here's what the value is all about, you clarify everything properly, that consumer is far more likely to stick with you, right? I think the third thing is retention is the problem with retention, the problem with measuring retention is that it's a very, very lagging metric. When you measure retention, so if I look at today, this is April, how many, if we have, let's say, 500,000 consumers, how many of them will renew to the next month? The damage is already done by then. The non-renewing consumers have already turned red. So I think between green and red, there has to be a state called amber. So when a node has turned from green to amber, you need to know instantly that, okay, someone in your network is unhappy. And so we call it an early warning system. So we built some early warning signals which tell us that, okay, something is going wrong with this student or with this teacher or whatever. So, some intervention is needed right away. So trying to win back a consumer post churn versus retaining a consumer when he's on the verge of churning, the latter is far easier. So you build these systems to make sure that your consumers don't churn out. But once a consumer has churned out, it's very hard to firstly win them back. And secondly, if they've become a red node, they'll go around and talk across the network about how bad you are. So I think that's how I think about it. Yeah.
Cool, because.
Yeah, I think CAC is like a income tax. You can't avoid that. The only way to overcome that is having a good LTV, right? But obviously, as Manan was saying, LTV is a very lagging metric, right? So, and all of us, I think most of us are generally kind of from the engineering background. We kind of love data. Whatever kind of data we can kind of slice and dice right now, we're going to focus on that. That's why we're going to do a lot of slicing and dicing on CAC, but we never look at the entire journey of LTV, right? So the way we break it up is LTV will happen over multiple years for a business like us, which is like a in the K-12 space, right? The children will be there with us for 4, 5, 6 years. We don't know, and we ourselves are like barely a year old, right? So for us, it was more about how we kind of break down the journey and kind of get some early indicators, like what Manan was referring to. I'll kind of go maybe one level deeper on that, right? So what we did was we said, okay, LTV will happen over multiple years, over multiple quarters, but we backtrack from that on the retention, right? But how do we kind of get to know whether the customer will be renewing? Because we sell like in a modules of 3 months each, right? And then they'll be kind of renewing. I can't wait for a 3 months. How I kind of take it further? So then we started identifying signals on which kind of a customer will retain with us, right? One very important piece was obviously they have to love the product, and second is they have to use the product, right? I think one big problem with EdTech is the completion rates are really, really poor, right? There are a lot of players who have kind of grappled with that problem, right? They are on one extreme Udemy's of the world, right? Big platform, but all of us know the completion rates are really poor, right? For us, it was very clear from day one, like how we going to make sure the completion rates are really high, right? And for each class, what are they kind of having? They have a great experience, right? So for us, we take rating of each and every class very, very seriously, right? Any kind of a non-5-star rated class from a learner, and we have two kind of a set of ratings. One is from the learner and one is from the parents. Obviously, the fill rates is much higher from the learner after session, parents are a little low. But we look at each and every rating, whatever is low, and somebody will kind of talk to each and every of them, like why the class was not good. We'll go back, look at the recording, and kind of really obsess about that. At each and every experience should be really world class, right? But in spite of that, sometimes you're seen, as I was telling earlier, right? The children are extremely busy, right? Sometimes they're liking the product, they're loving it, but they're not just kind of stop coming to the classes, right? Sometimes they have exams in between, or sometimes they're kind of traveling, or whatever else is happening around, right? So we again kind of, and that is, I would say, the ember zone over there, where they're not kind of turning up for classes, right? So we kind of call it like internally a code name, like a cold storage, right? Where the children are kind of coming to the classes, right? So if you're not there for 2 consecutive classes, somebody kind of call you up and kind of try to understand, right? And then make sure like we understand, okay, if you're traveling or exams or something, we kind of get you back on the journey as soon as your that kind of a live event has happened, right? So with those 2 things, with high rating, with high usage of that love product, which obviously leads to a good NPS and everything, we are making sure that the retention is happening. So then we are on a daily basis, we can understand if the rating is kind of going good and people are using a product, the completion rates are good, the retention is going to happen. If the retention is going to happen, they're kind of going to buy more, the LTV is kind of going to happen, right? So that's the way we are trying to kind of get that journey and making sure that we're kind of getting that LTV, because so far at least I haven't figured out the answer to CAC, but at least whatever is under our control of LTV and retention, we're trying to solve that in a more methodical way.
Cool. So before we open up to the audience, one last question to all of you. Let's say if the gods turn up and say, you know, Bache, what's your ideal and practical LTV to CAC ratio? You know, what do you want? Right? So what would your number be?
I think in our case, we even say this every single time we meet our team and we talk about long term, that learning starts when you become a micro entrepreneur. So we really feel that once you have acquired a consumer, we should be able to serve them for at least a decade and not just through education. So for me, I think in the first transaction itself, our LTV to CACs are 2 to 3. But we imagine that they should be in higher double digits over a period of a decade. If we are not doing that, then either we are losing out on the big opportunity or we are not serving our entrepreneurs well. So that's the philosophical answer to this. It's easy to say that right now, but let's see, time will tell.
Right. So very similar to what Vidit said. I guess for us, it has already started to happen where people are coming back for the second jobs, for the promotions, for the incentives. So very similar, 2 to 3 in the first go, but we'd love to create a lifelong learning product where you're coming and upskilling yourself again and again for a better socioeconomic status. So that's what our mission is, to achieve a greater socioeconomic status for our learners. And once that happened, then that's where we say that we are getting the right amount of LTV that we want. So yeah, decades of retention, and essentially not just retention, not just coming on app, but improving them to get, essentially they are achieving their dreams, they are achieving where they want to go.
I'd like to add something there, that for us, one leading indicator to this has been paid user retention after completion of the course. And so, I mean, it's a 2-month boot camp. You have a year-long access to do practice classes. And in those practice classes, we of course include certain things like after the 4th month, you'll get a free web builder so that you can promote your business. Or at the 6th month, you'll start unlocking these real world freelancer driven classes will tell you how to crack a micro market, which are more practice. So our week 16 paid retention, which is 2 months after the paid course has been completed, it is 86%. It actually starts dipping after the 9th month, but the base is lower because 9 months back we were. But I think as long as that number is not star for the retention angle of it, we know that there are touch points that we can monetize which you're not monetizing right now. But I don't know what the actual number comes out to be.
I think any LTV to CAC above 5 becomes exciting. You know, when you look at it, you know that, okay, this is a business or this is a model where you can pour money and, you know, you'll see huge returns. I think one mistake that I've made in the past, and I see a lot of people making, is they look at blended CAC. You know, so there's this term called blended CAC. So they look at all CACs across all channels average, and that brings down your CAC obviously. So, but if you look at performance LTV to CAC, that might be 1/10, and if you look at referral LTV to CAC, that might be, maybe 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever, higher than that, right? I think if a channel on a standalone basis is not making sense from an LTV CAC point of view, then it's not a channel worth pursuing. It's a counterintuitive point of view. A lot of people tell me that no, you have to jumpstart growth and so on. So on some channels, at least, you have to take this CAC hit, so by, let's say, pouring money, giving money to Facebook, Google, and so on, right? Incidentally, I heard recently that 46% of all India VC money goes to Facebook or Google. So it's crazy, right? So for us, at least, the North Star is, what Vidit also said. We serve 13 years, kindergarten to 12. So an average student could stay with us for potentially 6.5 years, if you average it across 13 years. So 6.5 years. In the US, our price point is $200 a month, on which our contribution is 50%. So that's, $100 into, let's say, 60 months is $60,000 of LTV, which is huge. And if we can bring down the CAC to, let's say, $500, that's an LTV to CAC of 120, right? So, I mean, in the long term, that is the ambition. We could get there with time as the brand becomes stronger and so on. But I think, anything that's above 5 right off the bat, and maybe 2 or 3, greater than 2 or 3 on the first transaction, I think it makes sense. I think the other thing to just look at also is, if you have really strong retention, then you can, take some hit on the first transaction. So the first transaction LTV might be low, as long as you are sure that, the customer will stay with you. I think a lot of people counter that by locking in a lot of money upfront, because they know that the consumer will not renew again. I'm not a fan of that strategy. I think a consumer should stick with you if they like you. So in general, we try to kind of, find that right balance. Yeah.
Yeah, just one thing to add. I think we are aspiring for LTV to CAC of 4, but also I think it's very important to understand the definition of that, right? A lot of times I think we just look at LTV as just a top line number, but there's also a lot of cost going, and CAC itself is a big cost, right? So the way I look at it is a CM1 LTV, which is kind of taking care of, let's say, if you're doing live classes, all the teacher cost, operations cost, video cost, all kind of a variable cost that you're kind of running to kind of get that. So which is actually the cash that you're kind of left with. That's what I'm going to call as a CM LTV. If let's say that is $500 that you're kind of getting from a customer over time, while the top line might be $5,000. And then what is a CAC that you're kind of spending? And I think Manan put a very valid point that it has to be a channel based. And then you look at CM LTV by the CAC, which is the actual spends that you're doing right away. I think if that is above, typically people in the industry kind of say is above 3 is good, right? And I think if you can do like 4 or 5, that is like a golden number, really good. And then that can easily cover at scale your kind of fixed cost, and kind of you can be a good EBITDA profitable company.